Obviously, spoken to you all about the last week or so. The topic of this one came about quite organically, speaking with Johannes a few weeks ago. I'll obviously let him go into a bit more detail, but he's kind of taken the leap of faith and co-founded his own venture. So I think, again, actually got the idea of sitting on one of the roundtables he was saying a few months ago. So really, really interesting. Yeah, but the conversation kind of got going, and obviously being kind of a director of engineering at a well-established business, to then go off, and obviously there's people on the call here that I know have co-founded their own businesses. It may be at the kind of objective at some point in the future for others. So it's a completely different skill set, isn't it? Having then to have those kind of investor conversations, investor relations, fundraising, etc. So it kind of made sense to maybe to discuss that. So I'll hand over to yourself, Johannes, to obviously go in a bit more detail. But obviously, yeah, speaking candidly, it was just he's taken the leap of faith. So yeah, wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, that's already a great introduction. Really, part of what inspired me to build what I'm currently building. It came from one of the CTO roundtables. The problem that we had discussed at the time was how going virtual in COVID times changed the way we are running meetings, and that meetings need more structure, more facilitation. You can't just put people in a room and expect things to work. And so why are meetings not more efficient? Well, we all know there's three things meetings need, which is an agenda, meeting notes, and then action items. And yet people tend to not always follow through with that. And it's just, it feels like you need 20 different tools to get everything done well, and it needs a lot of discipline. So I'm building a solution to simplify that, inspired by the CTO Roundtable. And one of my next steps and one of my next questions is definitely going to be about raising money. I already have a co-founder who's on the non-technical side. So for me, as the technical co-founder, I'm particularly curious about what's specific from that perspective, and I'm planning to raise money in the next couple of months without having done that previously. And so I thought that was a great opportunity, because there's lots of people here who are either going through something similar, want to go through something similar, or have gone through something similar. And that's what today should be all about, not just about my problem. That's maybe what I'm very curious about, of course, but really I want to open that up to everyone. And I want to start off with giving everyone an opportunity to reintroduce themselves. I know I've seen, I think, everyone here previously in one of the roundtables, so you don't need to talk about everything that you do, but there are two things in particular. First of all, what's your previous experience in raising money? Do you have any plans of raising money in the future, or are you maintaining any active investor relationships at the moment? And then the third thing is, please pass it on to the next person to introduce themselves as well. So that said, I'll hand it off to Frank.
I'm Frank. I have some experience in raising money, especially as part of being the CTO of Audibird. We went through 4 investments rounds so far. I was part of the last one, and we are always on the lookout for fresh money. So I've been part of giving management presentations to future investors and others. And my experience in that is that it is important also as a CTO to be part of that and have a tech story that makes sense and that you present. And with that, to Payman.
Thank you, Frank. So hi, my name is Payman. I'm a co-founder of NeuroJam. I founded the company last year, so I have some experience with fundraising or organizing money, because it's not always like, sometimes it's money from an investor, from a business angel, or also from the state. So in that direction, I worked in the past. So our business right now is still growing. That means, like, we guess in the next year, we will again go for a next round to push the business more forward. Yeah, that's it from my side. The next one is Jörg.
I knew that it's me, the next one. I don't know why. Thanks. I have no experience with raising money, but I usually our CFO and CEO did raise money at Marley Spoon, for example. Yeah, but I know how it is if money gets tight and not able to be paying the invoices in 2 weeks anymore. So I know that feeling, but not more, unfortunately. And I don't have plans to raise money, but I'm extremely curious about, because as you started before, I sometimes think about, okay, do I have any ideas, and how would I start it, and how would I get to get some first money? Yeah, and so I'm extremely curious about how that works. Less than X, I guess, huh?
I too had a hunch that I was next somehow. Yeah, hi, I'm Lester, currently the head of technology for the real estate group at Immobilien Scout here in Berlin. My experience with raising money is, I was a founding CTO of a startup here in Berlin. And yet, just certainly to second what Frank was saying, it feels like you always are raising money. We raised a pretty good venture round. That was quite nice. But afterwards, you are then always wearing the hat of raising money, meeting investors, pitching. And my experience is around that in developing the initial product up and having a vision around that you can pitch, and meeting potential future investors in the future. So I've got some insights there and some lessons learned and experience with that. So next I hand it over to Alexei, please.
Yeah, thank you, Lester. I'm Alexei, so working as a head of engineering in a company called Gentolo. And we are doing insurance business for dental services, and we are part of the big corporation now of the Zurich Insurance Group. So on on earlier meetings, I maybe also mentioned about our acquisition part. So I have some experience also working with investors, and as we don't have CTO in the company right now, so literally I'm doing kind of CTO responsibilities and also working as a CTO in the past. So role of the CTO is extremely important during the acquisition process, and also during this technical pitches and all those things. And at the current company, for example, as we pass all stages, like from the really early stage till the acquisition of the big corporation, and I was also taking a role in a technical due diligence process and also representing company from the technical side. And also I had some experience working with some government programs like a Profit and so on, but they're like a very, very different from how to say working with venture funds and also working with government programs, institutions. Great, and next I would hand over to Dmitry.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Dmitry. I'm CTO and CDO of Insurance. What we are doing, we are building bank assurance platforms for financial institutions like Deutsche Bank, where you can manage insurance portfolios of the customers. I have a lot of experience with fundraising. I was founder myself twice. I was co-CEO of project company in Israel, which were doing some development services. I was part of 2 exits, one cybersecurity startup in Israel, and also in previous company of Bonify, I was doing literally a lot of fundraising, not only as CTO, as more or less partner. So it's more about Series A and media for equity deals. I think somebody asked if somebody keeps a relationship to investors. I think it's very important also for CTOs to keep relationship to investors. So I'm maintaining a couple of relationships, but more on the angel level, like I'm in personal level, than venture capitals. That's it, I believe. I will pass it by to Adam.
My name is Adam Skafi. I'm the founder of effectively Quintic Digital GmbH as well in Berlin. And I am the founder. We have developed a product called KidLink. It's taking care of the digitalization at the nurseries, daycare centers. And effectively, it has 4 components. So it's almost the only complete solution on the market. We have raised some business angel fundraising, and now we are in the process to raise some money from venture capital.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think I found it very informative. As I said, I've met heard of everyone here before. This was a completely new perspective for me, and found that quite valuable context setting. So thanks a lot, everyone, for your participation. So as I said earlier, I want to make sure that today is not just about my questions. I think that's impossible in this group anyways. So I want to collect everybody's inputs. I want to make sure that we take the next 3 minutes where we all reflect on 1 or 2 questions that we want to have answered. And I'm going to share this link in a second. This is a tool called dot storming. You can add a card here with a question that you would like to have answered or discussed today. This can either be something where you're really curious about it and you want it to be part of the conversation today, or it's something where you say, oh, I've gone through this. I wish I had known that as my younger self. I really want to talk about that. So the very first question came from Adam. Investors receive a lot of pitch decks and business plans on a daily basis. How do you bring them into a face-to-face conversation? Obviously, there's a couple of people who managed to get them into a face-to-face conversation. So I want to directly open it up and ask who feels like they've done a good enough job to be somewhat qualified to answer this. And I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be, it depends. But if you've done it once, you probably have stories to tell.
I can tell you how it was for us with a business angel as an investor. And that was mainly a person which we know before. So in the best case, especially in the start, it's someone where you had contact already before, or you know someone who knows this person. And then it's much easier to get in touch with that person. When you talk to VCs, then it's usually about marketing. To have some traction, to have some customers, some clients, so that people talk about you, you have articles outside, and then they understand also what exactly your vision is for that kind of venture. And yeah, I think these are the main 2 topics, at least for me, how it was in the past.
Yeah, so just to focus on the second aspect. So I know that the business angels, you need some networking and you need, you know, some close to look around you and talk to the closest people, maybe that they trust you and they trust the product. But I'm more interested in the venture capital side, you know, because they receive a lot of pitch decks and plans and so on. And sometimes the pitch deck doesn't really reflect the real case that you have. Regardless how good you are in the pitch deck, sometimes you cannot deliver the whole message within the pitch deck or the real value in the pitch deck. So the question is much more focused on the venture capital. So thank you, Payman.
What I would say to that a little bit is that you are going to put your pitch. We put our pitch decks to so many places, and you just have to know that you're not going to get everybody. And there are a lot of it just goes out into the void, and you shouldn't expect that, you know, this person didn't get back to me. You know, is it landing on the right desk in that office or in that, you know, with that group? So just right away, don't have the biggest expectations that every single drop is going to lead to a face-to-face. So just right away, just almost forget that idea. And kind of going on what Payman was saying is that if you have co-founders that are coming with some domain experience, they're going to have a Rolodex that you can lean on, and you should look around at your Rolodex and folks that you might know to open some doors and to say, you know, I'm kind of coming in an industry where I have a little bit of knowledge. So I've got some traction there, at least with my networks, and start there to get some doors open to begin with.
I would like to add something, because maybe it's a bit connected to my question, which I had to find the right investor. So investors are not randomly putting money into some kind of business. They're usually focused on a specific topic, for example, on e-commerce, on IoT business or only on online business, and they don't want to do hardware. So if you are focused on your kind of topic and you only attack these kind of investors, they will be much more attracted to have a look on this kind of pitch deck when it's exactly about their topic. As a side note, I think that helps at least a bit for a further company where I worked for that was very much focused on real estate, and both investors were real estate investors more or less. So they didn't do anything else beside that. So that helped at least.
Maybe from a couple of cents from my side. So I agree with Payman. Like, it's not only about the industry, it's also about the stage of the round. Certain venture capitals are focusing on seed rounds, certain venture capitals on Series A, certain on Series B, and so on. And for each series, right, so you have completely different requirements. Sometimes you need to attract market traction, for example, sometimes not, right? So every stage requires something. So that's why the better you filter to whom you are sending your pitch, like this, you're increasing your chances, obviously, right? So second, maybe tip from my side is references. You cannot imagine from where you can get references. Just ask everybody. It's always better that your pitch deck will land on anybody stable in this venture capital if somebody will bring it and not you. So if they don't know you, obviously, right? So just asking all your environment and all your network, right? So believe me, you will find some unbelievable connections that you would never imagine, right? So even if it's blind, like kind of call for your network, right? So then another thing is that venture capitals, especially small ones, right? So they have not a lot of people, and they have partners and analysts. So it's much easier to get through the analysts than partners. This is another point that sometimes if you can send not only, like, if you have the contacts of direct partners, obviously it's much better, but you can find sometimes in LinkedIn or even on official pages, right? So analysts which are working for those partners, right? So, and this is one of the way-ins also could be, right? So, and one more thing that I know work from one of my friends is that, so you are taking the company which is just raised money in your industry, for example, in another country, like it was Brex in US, and you actually include it as part of your email or part of your pitch even, right? So that investors here in Germany, for example, can see that actually there is some traction going on with large investments in your particular niche industry or product, right? So, and you make a reference for just raise money for other company.
Thank you very much. I think what I'm hearing a lot of is building on connections is really key, no matter which round, and then also trying a lot of investors. But if I understand that correctly, your main thing is you feel like a pitch deck is just not a good way to communicate about your product, right? So even if you do send it to lots of people, there should be more that would be interested if you would have a face-to-face conversation. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So that's the gap where I see it happening at the moment. So you send a pitch deck, you have very good business plan. It's very professional. It's very proved from economical companies who have, I don't know, 20 years of experience. Okay, and then people don't talk sometimes. Okay, so they just receive that we are not interested or something like that. Okay, there could be many reasons, but the question is that on the other hand, when we show the product and the potential that we have, people simply they say, oh wow, that's really a great thing, and we are in, and so on, and then suddenly the discussions start happening. So, and this is what we are still in the very, very early stage in terms of talking with the investors. So we just sent the pitch decks, but I'm just thinking that this pitch deck, it's very professional. The business plan is very professional, but in the end, doesn't. When I look at this from outside, it doesn't reflect the real value behind the product unless you see it. So when you see if I tell you about a beautiful car, you will say, yeah, it's nice, it's okay. But when you see it, it's just a different feeling. And then that could flip the whole game in terms of saying, you know what, I am now interested to learn more about the car. I'm interested to test it even, and maybe I'm interested to invest in this car, you know. And this is the gap where I was, trying to understand if there could be another way to reach the investor beside sending a pitch deck and a business plan. But I liked as well the marketing aspect, which is kind of a third party that will highlight your potential and your product, and that will facilitate the communication with the investor or the access to the investors.
Adam, just to be sure that I fully understand you, is it more or less about the format, like the PDF file or presentation? Because you can also do a video, right?
Exactly.
That would be much easier, maybe, and much better to see the real product, to have some kind of prepared showcase for the investors. And as far as I know, they're lazy, you know, they don't want to read full documents. They watch a video if it's easier.
We have a video. The question comes, how do you bring people to watch the video? You know what I mean? So the video, it's included within the pitch deck, like the marketing material, but how do you bring them to click on this link? I know that there could be a lot of you know, ideas and so on, but I'm just thinking what could be another aspect that we can consider besides sending a pitch deck or sending a material. The key question is that some people do not you know, deep dive into the whole story. They just look at even within a video, you cannot describe the whole product. We've done like infographics video, 1 minute, 20 seconds, very professional. And we have it. We've included that in the pitch deck even. My only concern is that that you don't get the chance to talk with venture capital to show what you have. This is the only concern. And how do you bring them much closer to your product?
So I think if I want to summarize all the answers we've had so far, it's there are all the connections you need to make use of, which can be previous investors, which can be co-founders, and through those connections, getting to the VC you want to talk to is much beneficial compared to just a cold email. We have the marketing approach of especially a larger round. It helps when you've been in the press and when you've been talked about. And we have a competitor has raised money, especially a US product that's doing the same thing, which was what Dimitri said. Put that at the beginning of your email that, oh, somebody's already doing this in a market that's ahead of us, making you a lot more interesting. Is there anything else that can really help give more visibility to your pitch?
So maybe not to the pitch, but like I have one VC friend, and he's saying that when I hear about the startups more than from one source, then I'm investing time in really deep in dive in this, at least looking at the pitch and so on. So I mean, like my maybe bold recommendation would be also be present, right? So I mean, there are many forums where you can really present your startup, right? So I mean, whether it's meetups, whether it's even the venture capitals organize for themselves different forums for such pitches, right? So also venture capitals like Mosaic, for example, they are doing parties for their founders, right? So and you can find founders of particular venture capital and really ask them maybe to introduce you or to invite you to such party, right? So I mean, and just find a way to be present on this market. And because if you're only sending pitch decks, right, so probably it can be also successful, but your chance is significantly lower, right? So when you do 3-4 things, right, and then people, okay, I actually heard about this one, this startup in some other forum, maybe it's worth actually looking at this. So yeah, this would be my maybe last kind of suggestion.
I think that added a new perspective as well. Thanks so much. So Sarah, you just joined. You already introduced yourself on the chat a little bit. Earlier when I asked for introductions, I also asked everyone to share 1 or 2 sentences about previous fundraising experience, and currently, are you maintaining investor relationships, or are you looking to fundraise in the near future?
Yeah, so right now, so this is not the most relevant topic for me, but I thought that I wanted to kind of to check in. The fundraisers that I've mostly been working in, so I've been in the fintech industry. So I've been working with, you know, big classical banks. So that's a very different way to, you know, discuss funding rounds and make sure that you have funding from these big organizations over a period of time. So that's more that I've been involved in. Everything from, you know, playing golf with the director of the board and stuff like that. But no, the venture capitalist, it's not something I've worked so much with. Perhaps, yeah, in the future, but yeah.
I think we had already various backgrounds of how to raise money. So I think this adds to the diversity here. That's nice. The next topic, the next question came from Frank. How to deal with investors who don't care about tech. I think this is very interesting.
Yeah. And if I may, yeah, sure. Let me share an experience. But as I told you in the beginning, that there have been quite a number of meetings where I was part of the executive management team presenting our Oldbird story or product roadmap or unit economics, all of that, but also, of course, our tech stack and how we handle IT risks to new investors. And one of the worst experiences which I had was, I think it was basically a 4 or 5 hour meeting, so a half-day kind of meeting. Agenda was laid out, and of course, I had being the tech guy, only half an hour anyway, right? So it is never have I been in a situation where technology was the most important thing for new investors. But while they were in discussions, especially around business cases and unit economics, they needed more and more time of that. So a couple of times during the meeting, people would say that, Frank, could you do it also in 20 minutes? Yes, of course. 15? Yes, of course. 10. And at the time, we really came to recognize that either I leave the meeting now or they let me speak. They allowed me to say 3 sentences about IT, which was something like, I have it under control. Thank you very much. It was nice meeting you. And afterwards, I felt like I've totally wasted my time. We as a company recognized they would not be good investors for us because of the lack of appreciation for technology. But I would love to hear your experiences and maybe your strategies to handle those kind of investors.
It might be a blessing in disguise. I mean, if you are being given not much oversight there in the presentation, you know, I would say just a sophisticated investor is going to know that technology is in the background and is powering a lot of what you're doing. So don't ask for more attention really than you need. But you know, your investors are going to know that you will be expected to speak to the technology and what's there. I really haven't seen that as a problem. It's usually kind of the opposite.
From my side, I tend to agree more with Lester, right? So I also had this experience which you, Frank, described, right? So I really feel you. So, but I'm more like Lester, do not see it as a problem. So if I understood you, Lester, correctly, right? So I feel that you know, like finally the goal is to find the right investor and to win this pitch, right? So whatever pitch it is. So and sometimes you know, this kind of negligence of your time, right? So I mean, like that you have only 10 minutes is not because the tech is not important. It's because they are buying not only tech, right? So and that's why sometimes it's coming actually from trust, right? So for example, if your team or you have a good brand outside, right? So and they did the reference check already, they probably have more doubts about business model, and that's why they invest in time and more in business model. So, but sometimes it's not like this. I agree, right? So it's not always like this. I'm just saying that probably if it's really tech product, right? So you need to make sure that investor really understand the value of tech. I think it's important, but it is less about time spending in this pitch, right? So it is more about finding the right investor for your company. And sometimes you don't need to pitch, right? So which is totally fine, because at later stages anyway, usually if you're already in Series A and forward rounds, they will have a tech due diligence, right? So this is a norm.
So that last part you said, Dimitri, is
Yes.
they have due diligence at some level. does it really depend on the stage at which you're talking to the investor? Like, is it really a blessing in disguise on seed level, and then Series A, somebody at the investor should want to talk about tech? Or how do you see that?
I think it depends on the stage. If you are raising on PowerPoint, which is seed round, right? So probably nobody expects you to draw architectures, right? So because there is nothing to due diligence, right? So it's more about business model and team, I believe, right? So if you are talking about the Series A, or for example, we made media for equity deal, right? So when after the Series A, before the B, we actually were raising money for marketing, right? So we had a product and we were raising money for marketing, and then it was one of the heaviest due diligence because the investors were needed to be sure that your tech is really working, right? So it was much heavier due diligence than in Series A, where you're raising money for building a product, right? So in Series B, they assume you have a product and it is working, and they making due diligence. So I think the statement about due diligence is really depends on which stage you are, right? So, but from my at least experience that I had, starting from Series A, it's always pretty good technical due diligence. It doesn't matter if you have a good pitch or how much time you really had in this pitch conversation. It's always come heavy due diligence and tech, at least in companies that I was part of, right?
I agree as well with that. So what I've used as well to do, if I can sell my product to the clients, that means I'm able as well to convince the investors, because the business case is almost the same, and that's the potential that the investor would like to see. And what we usually use to follow a strategy, not to show the technical aspect of the product rather than the business aspect, and that means focus on the problems that this product is gonna solve and focus on the benefits to the clients. And then you focus just on the top first or second or top two benefits that your product will offer to the market and to the clients. And this is how you bring the interest and you wake up the interest of the investor. So every investor will understand the business aspect, but not everyone will understand the technical aspect. So the error would be, or the mistake would be, if you just focus on the technical aspect and ignore the business and the economical aspect of the product. And this is what the investor doesn't want at the end.
Yeah. Also, thanks, Adam. Also, venture capitals has a tendency to hire external companies for the due diligence, right? So it's exactly support what Adam said, because they really focusing on business, right? So and that's why they're using third-party providers to actually make for you due diligence, right? So they are not hiring architects and CTOs in their company. Not sometimes yes, but it's not common, right? So at least from my experience. So that's why yes. For the investors themselves, probably it's even sometimes better to pitch marketing, business models, and so on. And then on technical due diligence, really to invest time in preparations, right? So when some third-party company is starting to do so.
So what we used, like we're using always, like our motto to the product, we're saying always that yeah, our product will reduce at least 20% of the administration effort to the client. And this is what we are trying always to prove within KPIs. And that means if you translated that in money, and talking about, we're talking about Kitas or daycare centers in Germany, they have personal cost, a small Kita or medium Kita, they have almost 20 million personal cost in a year. And if you are able to prove that they're gonna save at least 20% of their administration effort, that accounts for like 4 million euro, and then they are paying for our solution for like 100,000 euro a year, and that's the business model that the investor would like to understand. And then you bring the technical solution that will solve this issue or introduce this solution, and simply let the investor, from my perspective, understand the pain points of the business aspect and how your solution is gonna save it, and then solve it, and then bring the technicalities at the third place.
I do want to bring it back to Frank for 1 second, because I'm wondering if we're still discussing the core of his question, or if we've drifted off.
I mean, I was asking that question because I believe it's if you bring together a group of technical managers and you discuss investment rounds, that is maybe a question that is relevant. I for myself, especially with Orderbird, it was already we were talking about an investment for the 5th round, so after Series D, where of course we have an established customer base, we have an established legacy app, we have risks which we carry around, we have modernization strategies while we still add value into the platform, all of that, right? And I always found it beneficial if the investors have at least some level of understanding of how technology works, because then, first of all, they can see the risks with me and I can convince them that we can work them. And also they would not later on be surprised about things like, oh, you cannot deliver as fast with the same amount of people as if you would develop something on the greenfield. I never heard about that, but I just find it more beneficial if investors have some level of technical understanding. But I agree to all of what has been said, especially earlier in the first round. Seed doesn't make sense. You don't have a product, you don't have technology. So, right. And I also had tech due diligence. Maybe last sentence about that. A couple of tech due diligence has been done with companies I've worked for. What I found surprising and maybe even disappointing, that at some of them I was able to satisfy by just giving very, very easy answers. Some of them were too easy for me. I hope that makes sense to you, right? I was surprised at times about the lack of depth that those due diligence agencies would want me to go, about the lack of auditing they would do. They wanted me to do lists and slide decks, and then they would say, yeah, okay, looks good, right? So not sure if that's also your experience, but it's mine.
I just want to, from my side, to add that I can agree with previous speakers, with Dmitry, Adam, and Frank, about the technical due diligence process, and that it's dependable from the stage and also dependable from the investor. But I want to add that it's also dependable, basically how heavy it will be, dependable from the product, yeah, and what basically the company is doing. Because in our case, as we were like small startup, but which operates the healthcare data with fintech data, and during this acquisition side, when company which has like 100 years of reputation, like Zurich Insurance Group, want to acquire us, and basically we can, if something will go wrong, we can destroy everything at once. Yeah, so because we'll be integrated to this corporation systems and so on, and that's why we knew that, yeah, and we were prepared. We involved external agency who help us to do the technical due diligence process. Also, we asked many questions to us. Are we buffing? Do we have compliance with buffing, and a lot of like different topics. But the thing is that if it's about sensitive data and so on, then I think you should expect due diligence process on all stages of the investment rounds.
Perhaps I can also just add something, because I've been through a lot of due diligence processes, especially the last 3 years, and I agree that it's a very big range. Like I have an experience of that when they're using third party, it's usually not as deep as when you have investors have like a stronger technical knowledge, then they want to be a bit more involved. But I think for me, I kind of see it as a dance. It's about leaving a very good impression, but still being being open and truthful about certain things, and that's always a hard dance. But yeah, it all depends on the kind of investor, and that I think it also tells a lot about who the investor is and what expectations they will have in the future. So this is a good way also to learn more how to work with them.
Earlier, I tried to summarize everything that was said. This time, it's really hard to summarize because we covered so many topics. The main things I remember, at least, are it's gonna change with the rounds, it's gonna change with your product, and the more sophisticated investors are more technically the more technically sophisticated ones definitely have questions. And if you have a product where it's important to have investors that do understand the tech, make sure they ask the questions about it. Otherwise, you get the very lightweight due diligence, which may be fine for some products as well. That's my takeaway, at least. Jörg, you asked the next question, which was, you have your pitch ready, no investor contact at all, how to get in contact with investors. I think we covered part of that in the very first question, so I'm not going to ask everyone to repeat that, but maybe you can add some extra color on your perspective here.
I was wondering, right? I mean, yeah, it's like an ocean of people you can contact in different ways. I just was thinking lately about that. Yeah, what would be my first best move? Is it just as said before, get some context of people who know people and try to do that? Is it better to do it the kind of old-fashioned way and just send out some stuff to investors? But when you get material needs to get read, yeah, which might be hard. Yeah, it's just my thinking of how would I start? What would be the most effective or efficient lever to go in that?
So I always recommend not to send everything to everybody. So I always suggest to do at least 1 or 2 dry runs, right? So because your pitch deck is also having kind of maturity levels, right? So you have the first version, which you think is outstandingly brilliant, and then you receive the first feedback, right? So, and then you change things, and then you calibrate a bit, right? So, and so on. So my suggestion would be not to send to everybody immediately, but try to find again through the references of somebody that you know, and to have a valid feedback, right? So if you don't have, then yes, to send maybe to 1-2 investors to see the reaction at least, and so on. Because you can fall in the trap that you send it to everybody, and then you discover that actually your pitch deck is not covering a lot of things, or you need to be calibrated slightly differently, like someone mentioned here, from marketing perspective more, and so on. And then you're kind of burning already because you already sent the pitch, right? So my suggestion would be to really to have at least 1-2 dry runs with somebody.
Would you rather prefer to go, I mean, try it out before, get it challenged, of course, is a good idea. But would you rather go via only other contacts, or just also LinkedIn and so on directly?
I mean, like maybe it's my personal, but if I would raise money, again, I would go by any channel possible. So, I mean, like I would start probably first, obviously, with my direct contacts and angels and VCs that I know, right? So this is the best way to, when, for example, you have angel, which constantly invest in somewhere money, right? So, and you want to have this dry run, so then send this only to him or her and have this conversation. But on the, like, from my experience, we were using so many different channels and ways and pitching and family offices and you name it. So that's why, again, it's very dependent on the stage also, obviously, right? So, but I strongly suggest to have at least 1 or 2 dry runs by some channel, right? So, yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, but again, it's maybe my biased opinion, right? So I'm speaking from experience of myself.
A little bit what Dimitri said before, the don't be afraid to, don't go to investors, but go to pitch nights or meetups and present your pitches there publicly. And I wouldn't worry about, you know, your idea is too early or too fresh to be shown out there. You know, chances are everybody's working on their own stuff. People are busy. Nobody's going to steal your idea or anything like that. You know, if anything, your idea is being, you know, put in front of more eyeballs, and it's a good place to get some attention there.
I also can add that there are like a lot of startup battle events where you can basically do both, like try to represent your company, your product, and also basically find potential contacts for the investors who maybe will not invest to you, but maybe they will tell to others. And I was like invited to one of these like events as a judge, and I see that some of the startups became quite successful in a later stage. And yeah, maybe you can participate also. Yeah,
great ideas. Thank you. Is there any other channel that we haven't covered yet? There's obviously get in contact with investors. my head is racing again to business angel and VC. But there's also Sarah's perspective, which is not that. So how do you start with that? That might be a very interesting perspective, as well as the more government funding side. How do you start with that? How much do you need in preparation for that?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to this kind of, you know, the bigger companies or the banks that has kind of their funding organizations, this is all about connections. This is about knowing someone who knows someone. So in our company, we worked, it was basically a company called Bridgemaker, who worked very close with the banks. So we kind of used that kind of mid view to get in contact with these people in the world. And now I have the contact to them, but it's very hard to get started, because it's usually very small groups there. But it's very nice to have that kind of investor, because I feel that there is less, in some sense, there is less stress than from like certain VC, because you could say that they have less knowledge about certain things. But on the other side, what we had to do, that we had to go through a set of milestones, which all had kind of like a due diligence tied to them, which I think was a bit more in depth than if we would have gone for a VC investor. So it was a very, it was a different experience, a lot more structured. But yeah, it's also a way to get money.
Cool, thank you very much. And does anybody want to talk about the government funding?
I can say a few words about that, because we did that last year. So there are investment banks like IBB in Berlin or ELB in Brandenburg. And it is a very bureaucratic topic. So you have to go through a lot of different kind of processes, create a lot of documents. So we did that with a company together, which helped us to organize the whole thing so that we are still focused on our business. That works if you have the energy for that, or if you have someone who's really into bureaucratic tasks, then it's perfect. Otherwise, it's a pain in the ass, I would say. And so nothing for me, to be honest. But we had someone in the team who was willing to do that for us. So that was nice. But the whole topic about investors, I think one of my first like former bosses told me, like investment, like whenever you want to get an investment, the best investor usually is a client. So if it's easier for you to get a client, try to find a client and not an investor. That will anyways attract additional investments. So that's how I see it. So before I usually think about an investor, I think more about, okay, isn't it much easier for us maybe to find a good client who covers the cost for the next kind of step in our business?
Let me try and summarize this one again. How to get in contact with investors? Well, obviously what we said earlier about connection matters, but basically there's lots of different ways, and it's probably the right thing to use all the ways that you can possibly use, from pitch nights to finding connections who are connected to the people you need to talk to, especially when you're kind of looking for a niche corporate investor like a bank. And the government funding is very bureaucratic. That's one thing I'm taking away. It works, but if you have the stamina for that kind of work. Next one would be, you can invest a lot of effort in due diligence. What's the right amount of effort?
One thing I wanted to kind of just throw out there, I guess, and something I kind of learned on the fly doing that and pitching to investors, was to keep in mind the life cycle that your startup is in. So just speaking to what Dimitri was saying there, whether you're in seed or what round of venture funding you're looking for, the world looks different, and try to speak to that world, and don't get too far ahead of yourself and start pitching that you're going to do big data and you're doing mobile and internationalization or whatever when you're just not there yet. So I would say to that, don't do more due diligence than you have to, and try to just be effective for the stage of the life cycle that your startup is currently in. And that helps focus you and really kind of just sets the boundaries and time boxes you, and you know what you will not focus on. So, you know, I would be crazy to say security is not important, for instance. You probably wouldn't say that out loud on stage, but when you have 100 users, or when you're just your internal users, or you're just baking something, maybe that is not the most important thing, but you could really go down a rabbit hole following security in every layer of your application, you know. So just try to stay within the life cycle that you're currently in, I would say.
Yeah, I totally agree with Lester. I don't think I have so much to add, but I think that what you run into a lot of this due diligence is that if you start to feel that you're doing a lot of things because you are being afraid of not being good enough, then it's about, you know, going back and resetting that, as you said, Lester, in what stage is my company? And it's all about confidence and feeling comfortable with what you're presenting. And you know, if they have more questions, they will come back to you. You don't have to make it, you know, this perfect and this fear-driven first due diligence. So yeah, good answer, Lester.
Yeah, also I can add, I'm not sure how good is that as an answer, but usually I have the strategy when people ask me questions, DD questions about tech, I go broad before I go deep. So what I wanna present to
Do you have an example for that? Because that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, sure. What I wanna, first of all, what I wanna make sure is that they see that they're talking to a tech manager on the other side who sees the whole landscape of technology, be it operational excellence and software delivery, processes and QA, but also the people side of the business, because it's peopleware after all, right? Not software. So what I try to do in answering the questions or preparing a slide deck or writing a document is I really have something to say about each and every aspect of what I'm doing with my organization. And then, of course, depending on the stage and phase and the interests of that particular investor, maybe I would go deeper on certain aspects. So you would usually find me to have rather more slides without some of them being extra deep. And then, of course, in the discussion, when questions come up, it's always a good idea to be prepared to answer questions at least one level deeper than you have them on the slides. But it's also fun to say, okay, cool, let's follow up with that. So, but this is a strategy that worked for me.
What I can add maybe is when we had the due diligence for our IPO 2.5 years ago, it was mainly with banks. And I have a feeling for them it was mainly the amount of knowledge was very limited on the other end. Yeah, and so basically you can tell everything more or less because we don't understand properly. But I had the feeling that at the end it's about the risk in the next 2 years. And if there's something beyond, then it also would connect to the stage of the company. You don't have to be 100% secure if you have just 100 customers or whatever. But I felt that it's about what are the risks for the next 2 years, and if there's something substantial, you might need to tell them so that it's not pushing back on you later on. But that was my feeling. It's about getting them a feeling that nothing serious can happen in a foreseeable amount of time. Or can the business scale also? Yeah, is the system good enough to scale in the next 2 years? Or do major investments need to be taken in the next 2 years in tech, for example?
This might be a small niche question following up on the topic, but I usually feel pretty confident, in the diligences around, my departments, the product and engineering. But there's also a lot of tech being used, and security in ops, in marketing. So just a kind of a question: how do you make sure that you feel comfortable with these areas before starting these discussions? Probably then on later funding stages, or is it just me?
Quick answer. First of all, I completely can relate to what you say. Naturally, areas about IT security, compliance, it's so hard to give a perfect answer. So I was once asked by investors we already have, if we were dealing with GDPR in the correct way, and as the CTO and IT security officer, yes, of course, this is what we're doing. And then this investor told me that, of course, we're not doing it right because he just read about a court case or a proceeding where blah, blah, blah. You know, all that you can, there's no chance that you can do it completely right in those areas. On the other hand, I think for me, it is IT security, compliance, regulations is part of my day-to-day job. So I make sure that we are in a good setup in those things. And then I just talk about it because I believe it's the right things we're doing. So having it as part of your day-to-day job as the other stuff, I think is part of the answer.
Yeah, I know, but it's always a struggle.
So first of all, the right amount of effort, yeah, depends on the stage where you're at. Remind yourself of the life cycle that you're in to understand the level of due diligence. And I love what Sarah said about if you have like a panic of not getting it right, reflect on maybe you're trying to over prepare, because that was one of my previous mistakes in that in such a situation, for sure, that I was panicking. I wish I had heard that at that point. So thank you for that. And then there was the, well, go broad before you go deep, because they might not want the in-depth information, and be ready to answer one level more in-depth, but that should be enough most of the time. Our next question, well, there are two questions with the same number of votes, but one thing I did like, because it is somewhat similar also, how to talk about technical debt and risk in a pitch.
I can just say from experience what we did. We actually just put in a slide called risk towards the end. We gave the good news first of what we thought, you know, the best case scenario. And then we did have you know, nobody I think would want to hear somebody that thinks there's no downside and no dangers, everything is going to be great. Like, somebody would have already done it. There's got to be risk there. And we just did it on, I think it was 2 slides, going over about what the market conditions are, what are the dangers, and then, you know, in the technology, since it's backing what we did, yeah, it was kind of just mixed in there in, you know, that about the adoptions, about security. We're holding some PII data. It could be, you know, we were just blunt about it. We just put explicitly a slide or 2 towards the end of our pitches. And what were the reactions you got there? I don't remember them being bad. It was just like, yeah, okay. I mean, we know that that's, I think there are certain knowns that aren't big surprises. Like you were talking about users' data. So you know that you're already asking people for some profile data, their working history, some stuff. So I think kind of investors are going to know that you're handling PII at some point, and that could be a situation, you know. And there's then going back to that due diligence, some follow-ups there that, you know, they're going to expect that encryption is going to be there in your databases, and you've got processes around it. So it wasn't too surprising. I mean, any business is going to have risk.
I think one of the most interesting questions that I've gotten through the diligence is when they're asking, which is connected to technical debt and risk, is what is the percentage of what the team is putting on new development versus maintaining the system. So that's usually so far how I have been going into these technical depth discussions to kind of to motivate that percentage. But yeah, mostly related to bigger investors there.
Yeah, also can add to the same point as Lester mentioned, that basically we also collected our technical debts, but we are also clear about the timelines. So when basically in which kind of, at least like from the quarter perspective, in which quarter we are planning to finish, I don't know, migration to certain platform or enable encryption and so on, so on. So basically investors will have some expectation when it will be done. Yeah.
We did this also in on a slide on a pitch deck. Mainly it was a SWOT diagram, and I think the investors are also somehow expecting that. They want to know if you really thought about every kind of scenario, and otherwise it would be a bit unrealistic. They would have the feeling, okay, maybe he didn't think really about this kind of situation. It's similar to the case if you are saying like there are no competitors or something like that. So I think it's clever to show the risk and say, I'm aware of that, the whole team is aware of that, we're taking care of it. So I would definitely show any kind of risk when you have something in mind.
Yeah, just touching on what you said, Payman, and connecting it to what Sarah said. When people or investors ask me about, hey, Frank, how much time can your people actually put into software, new development versus maintenance? And to tell the true story and also a confidence story, what I would usually say is, oh, well, that depends on the area of the software, where software is already grown and making a lot of money because you have a lot of customers on there. It's usually 50-50, 50% new development, 50% maintenance. But of course, there are new areas where we add product now, where they can invest up to 90% of their time into new feature development. And that gives them a realistic picture of the world, but it also shows that the organization can, dependent on the situation, have different impact on the system. So that would be basically my answer, combining your two thoughts.
I want to open up the floor to what's something that we haven't talked about today you find really important to address, either because it's something you wish you'd known before raising money in the past, or because it's urgently on your mind and you didn't, and it hasn't come up yet.
I just want to mention something. So I personally think like the role of the CTO in the company will be more and more important. I mean, how Frank said, like often there's not so much time to talk about these technical topics. Often it's also because of the communication. It's too technical for these kind of investors. But when you look at bigger companies, at the CEOs, at Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, CEO of Google, of whatever it is, they're all engineers, all of them. Okay, so there's a huge change in that direction. So even when you're founding the company and you're the CTO, I would not be focused on just doing the technical stuff, because it's much more important for the business, especially when you have a technical product. So it's not a question, it's just a comment, sorry.
Yeah, no, this is great.
Mic drop.
I would say something that I did some of, but I probably think is always just great and continue, is to identify and leverage the networks of your investors, because at the end of the day, they want to be successful. And if they have other portfolio companies like our investors had, there are CTOs there as well, CEOs, CFOs, and whoever that are really great, and they're at varying stages of their life cycles. And I found it really just incredible to be able to leverage it, speak to my peers and other CTOs to get insight on there and to get advice and just maybe any help on things. They might have some extra credits on DigitalOcean or AWS that you can use for a project or something you've got coming up, or spare tickets to some event that they're not using that maybe can give you and you can use in your startup. So just those networks are just invaluable. And I would also say reciprocate as well and make yourself available to others in the network, because that's how then you can, maybe karma, or just to also open doors in the future when you need investment or other help in other ways.
Thank you very much, everyone. As I said, I had learned a lot. I saw a lot. I want to give the word back to Rich.
Thanks a lot for attending. As always, really, really valuable. Really enjoyed the session. Special thanks again, Johannes, for taking the time to put all that together.